Today I learned Queen Elizabeth once went for a walk near her Balmoral estate with one of her protection officers and met some American tourists who didn't recognize her. They asked her if she'd ever met the Queen and she said no, then pointed to her officer and said he has. They didn't connect the dots. Richard Griffin, who has been responsible for the Queen's safety for more than 30 years, told The Times that the monarch jokingly replied saying, "No, but this policeman has," as she indicated towards him. According to her former protégé, the group then just went ahead on their walk, completely unaware of who they had just met. The Queen likes to live a more low-profile lifestyle when she is out at Balmoral Castle, the Scottish residence in Aberdeenshire she visits every summer. The 50,000-acre property has been owned by the royal family since 1852. While in Scotland the Queen is famously known to prefer more pared-down clothing and wellies as opposed to her eye-catching coloured outfits. While the Queen likes to keep a low profile in tweeds and a headscarf, biographer Robert Hardman says she purposefully dresses in eye-catching shades during royal engagements. In his 2011 biography Our Queen, the author described her as engagingly modest. He wrote, "My favorite remark she ever said was, 'I can't ever wear beige because nobody will know who I am.'" This is one of many anecdotes revealed about the Queen over recent years. A former soldier said that Her Majesty often used to taste soldiers' packed lunches before they ate them, to make sure they were being looked after properly. The soldier said, "The royal family was so much fun to work for, they made all the soldiers feel at ease." One of Her Majesty's priorities was looking after the welfare of the soldiers who were responsible for providing support for all events. She often tasted our packed lunches to check we were being properly looked after before we went out on hunting or fishing trips. She would come to the kitchen and inspect the sandwiches. Most were up to scratch, but if they weren't, they'd be sent back.
Here's what the Redditors of TIL had to say about this.
Sahi1L responds. So the story was told by the officer. I was having a hard time picturing the Queen sharing this story with the public. I hope those Americans read this article and have the belated realization that it was them. Smiley face. KTNLX replies. Haven't you heard? She started a podcast, Between Two Corgis. Jesus 2 jokes. After this story was made public, there are probably thousands of Americans who swear this story happened to them. It's possible some of them have even been to England. Ferret Farm explains. Bit of a long read, and not all that connected, but this reminded me of the day I kinda met the Queen. TLDR at the bottom. Copied and pasted from when I posted the story earlier on one of the drug subs. One early summer morning sometime in the early 90s I was woken up by the phone. I worked in a posh London hotel and this was a day off for me. At the end of the line was my coworker, let's call her Samantha, because that was her name, well, still is. She was also off that day and told me that a couple of her friends from back home, Australia, had just flown into London as a stopover on their way to Amsterdam. She was going to meet them and do some touristing with them for the 24 hours they had before they moved on, and did I want to join? An hour later and the four of us meet on some Piccadilly Circus steps. Names are barely exchanged when one of her friends pulls a notebook out of her backpack and says look. Puzzled, we watch her open the notebook, fiddle with it a little, and then carefully pull out what looks like a small sheet of paper. You know where this is going. She says, we smuggled over a bit of acid, we'd like to see London, but think it might be fun if we were a little bit high, yeah? Yeah, okay. Yeah, fuck yeah. Okay then. A hit each, we get their bags stowed away, and we're off. Ferret Farm continues. I'm not originally from London, or England even, but between us, Sam and I had lived there long enough to know our way around. Or we did until the acid hit. As you can imagine, everything got really beautiful, spectacular colors, sounds, sensations, just wow time. We were wandering around pretty aimlessly for a couple of hours. A crack appeared in the happy bubble as we're coming to the end of an alley. I'm puzzled to see Pall Mall, a very wide road that goes from Buckingham Palace to Trafalgar Square completely fenced off, which isn't normal, and there are bobbies/cops everywhere. Shit. Logic tells me that we should just turn around and go wander off in some other direction, but paranoia tells me that turning around will definitely raise suspicion and we'd get chased down and severely beaten by an angry mob of anti-drug, tit-hatted policemen. So basically, keep walking, act natural. We reached the fence without getting any significant looks from the police. Looking around, I notice that it's not just police, there are quite a few tourists milling about as well. Something's about to happen, sweet. Trying our best not to act suspiciously, we stand around talking in very hushed tones, and only when necessary. Then we hear them. Coconuts. Lots of them. Clip-clop, clip-clop, clip-clop. It's coming from the right, from the palace. Oh, look, no, not coconuts, it's horses. A big bastard army of horses carrying guys in beautiful red uniforms, fancy hats, glimmering swords. More of them than I can hope to count, rows and rows and rows of these guys. Beautiful, actually more than that, awesome. I hate that word because it's so misused, but this scene really was awesome. I was in awe. Behind the red uniformed guards, or soldiers, I don't know what they were, comes a open-topped horse-drawn carriage. I squint as it gets closer to see who is in it. And fuck me, it's the Queen, with her husband, Philip. Now, I don't give a damn about the Queen. But holy shit, the fucking Queen is approaching and I'm tripping balls. I glanced over at my companions to make sure I wasn't just hallucinating, but no, their jaws have all hit the floor too. I was her #1 fucking fan at that moment. She's getting closer and closer, tirelessly doing her professional little hand wave thing that she does. When she's about to pass me, she's within spitting distance. I could probably have smelled her perfume if so many of these horses weren't shitting like no one was watching, assholes. She's about to pass when this obnoxious voice pierces through the clippity-cloppity of horses and the polite clapping from the crowd. All right? It screams, and I immediately realize it's mine as it's my hand that is up waving frantically. For a split second our eyes meet. I know she saw my Cheshire Cat grin for a split second because there was momentary pause to her wave. Then, sadly, she picked up the rhythm again and moved on. I turn and Samantha is staring at me, as are the other two, and a few of the coppers. It was the Queen, man. I plead. The tension is still there, so I try to save the day by looking at my bare wrist and exclaiming, "Oh no, we're gonna be late to Johnny's party. Let's go." I take off briskly, and sure enough they follow my lead. Brisk soon turns into all-out sprint, and with no police following, giggling is added to the mix, and eventually uncontrollable laughter as we collapse under a tree in a nearby park. Regent's Park, I think. Turns out it was a tradition for the Queen and Philip to do this on his birthday. Our timing had been very lucky. Later we redosed and added ecstasy to the mix as we hit some clubs. It was a spectacular day that ended with the visitors wishing they'd booked more time in London. TLDR, took LSD, saw the Queen who kinda waved at me. Crashed Stratsness jokes. It's because America doesn't recognize the monarchy. Moss20 replies. What are the odds that American tourists would run into Barbara Bush while in England? Torin responds. About 1 in 1776. Torin responds. Astark comments. The tourist then tipped the Queen $5 and told her how much they enjoy visiting this cute little country. As the Queen walked away, she could hear the couple discussing whether the tip was large enough, and the husband assuring his wife not to worry, because that was a lot of money to them. Advocate Saint then responds. Imaging pulling a pound note out of your wallet and seeing her face on it.
Thanks for watching, Today I Learned by the Reddit King. Please be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.